Excellent. Right, so that should be recording, hopefully. Cool. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for giving up your time this evening, and welcome to our presentation this evening on Clementhorpe. So, like I said, it has been recorded, but the only element of it that's been recorded is us, the speakers, and the screens themselves. So you don't need to worry about your voices or your videos. They're not going to be on the recording. So this evening we have got myself, so I'm Marilyn. I'm one of the engagement advisors on the York scheme. We've got Stephen Taylor, who is the project manager, and we've got Vicky McCausland, who's the client lead, who will be presenting with us this evening. And we've got Edward Dickinson, who is the engagement and facilitation lead, and he's here to keep us on check and make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. So the format of the meeting, we've got a 20-minute presentation, and then 30 minutes or so to answer as many of your questions as we can. Your mics will remain muted during the presentation, and that just helps us with the sound quality. If you have got any issues, please raise these to Edward via the chat function. So you've got a little chat with a little speech bubble on your Zoom. Click on that. If you've got any problems, just type your issue in there, and hopefully Edward will be able to sort that out. And we've also got the Slido working concurrently. So if you've got any questions you'd like us to answer, please log into slido.com. The event code is there. It's the hashtag K078, and that's going to be there on all the places, not to remember it. And then there's some questions in there already. So if there's a question that you see and you'd really like to see that one answered, click on the little thumbs up, and that will push that question to the top of the list. So we'll answer as many questions as we can in the time that we've got. Okay. So just to get started then, if you are able to get onto the Slido, and it should ask you where you are joining us from. So this is dual purpose. It's to get you into the Slido and to make sure that that's working properly. And also we are genuinely interested to know where you're joining us from. So if you're local to the Clementhorpe scheme itself or wider across the city, just let us know how wide our invitation has reached, and it gives us an idea of whether how many people are really interested in the Clementhorpe scheme, because we know it doesn't just affect those who live in the immediate vicinity. We know it has wider implications. So lovely, some answers coming in there already, and that's nice to know. So we've got some from very local. So welcome, Rooms in Waterfront House. And see if we've got a few more. So I'll just give that a minute just to get you started, and sorry, just to see where people are coming from. Excellent. Cool. A few more people joining there. Right, lovely. So lovely to see you all, and I say welcome everyone. So we will just get started. So the presentation this evening, I'm going to do a little bit of background and where we're up to in Clementhorpe. Stephen and Vicky are going to take you through what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, and particularly how we're going to be addressing the planning conditions. And then it's over to Edward, who's going to be opening the floor to your questions. Okay. What we won't be covering this evening is the scheme design, the planning committee and the decisions there, and also the construction programme, the phasing of that. And that's because we haven't got that information just yet, and we will be presenting that at our next event. Okay. So without further ado then, I know most of you, if not all of you who are joining us this evening, will already know who we are and what we're doing, but for the benefit of those who don't, just a really, really brief summary on York itself. So after the Boxing Day flooding of 2015, the government allocated a £45 million funding to ourselves to better protect properties in York from flooding. Now, York is a large, complicated area, so we divided up into smaller areas or flood cells where flooding occurs. And within each of these cells, the flooding is independent of flooding upstream and downstream of it. Now, each flood cell is unique, and that's in its geography, its amenities, how it's used, what buildings there are in it, but also unique in its complexities. We carried out initial assessments in each one of these cells, and that was to identify the mechanisms by which it floods, so how water arrives in there, and what options we've got to address that to stop it from flooding, and significantly, at what cost. We understand cost to individuals is immeasurable, and I'm sure most of you here will appreciate that. However, and the bottom line is, when it comes to spending government money, the financial cost of any defence in any area across England must outweigh the financial cost of flood damages. Now, Clementhorpe is one of 18 cells that we're working on, and that brings me nicely into Clementhorpe itself. So here you've got a map which shows the modelled flood outline, and this is the outline, the flooding that we are building our defence to protect against. Now, the flood outline we've got here is the 1% probability flood, but significantly it's larger than the flooding that we had in 2000. So the flood in 2000, I'm sure as you all know, is the largest flood that York has experienced. So we are protecting for a flood that's greater than that. So the unseen, the flood that we've not received yet. Okay. The operation has always been to build to a continuous line of defence, but given the complexities of this site, particularly underground, it's been a real challenge, particularly to develop a scheme that's affordable under those government spending rules. But here we are. So we've finally got a scheme. So we've designed a scheme that we've received planning for, and this will better protect 135 properties at an estimated cost of £7.7 million. So we got that planning permission back on the 11th of June, and then on 21st July we received those planning conditions. And now we're going to be handing over to Stephen, who's going to take us through those planning conditions and specifically what we're doing to make sure that we satisfy them.
Thanks, Marilyn, for the introduction. So yeah, my name's Stephen Taylor and I'm the project manager for the Clementhorpe scheme. I'm going to briefly cover what we're building as part of the scheme, fairly high level because we don't have much time today, and then inform you about what we will be working on over the coming months prior to us starting construction. So for those of you who aren't aware, the scheme consists of elements requiring both planning permission and also elements which are going to be constructed via our permitted development rights. Together, all of these elements will provide a linear defence line running from Poston Close, which is located just south of Skeldergate Bridge, which is basically the yellow square you can see on the map, running south into high ground behind the northwest corner of Roundtree Park, which is kind of the very southern tip of the orange square at the bottom of the screen. In total, we will be constructing or modifying a total of just over half a kilometre of defences to better protect Clementhorpe. Defence of Poston Close and Poston House will be via wall raising and construction of a small dwarf wall atop of the Poston Close steps. And then moving south to the Clementhorpe junction with Terry Avenue, we will be constructing a large floodgate, which will be deployed during a flood event. Waterfront House will be protected via an independent flood wall, which will be constructed in front of the building itself. Duke's Wharf, which is the blue square on your screen, we will protect that by raising its private roadway. On the Rooms Hotel site, the hotel constructed the majority of a flood wall as part of its initial construction. There is one section remaining which we will infill and ensure that linearity of defence through that area. The boundary of the caravan park will see the modification of existing defences and the construction of new defences, including a floodgate at its rear access. And then these defences will essentially run into high ground between Roundtree Park. Now, prior to us getting to site, we have a number of conditions that we have to satisfy, planning conditions that we have to satisfy. In total, we have 23 conditions which have been applied to this scheme. Some of these conditions ensure that we submit particular pieces of information or carry out particular activities prior to us getting to site. Since being granted planning approval for the scheme, we've been busy in the background creating documents and arranging pre-construction activities to ensure we can get to site as quickly as possible. Our current aim, providing we can satisfy all of these conditions, is to start on site in autumn this year. We will, of course, continue to engage with you and the wider community on our progress. Next slide, Marit. Yeah, thank you. As our efforts are focused on satisfying these planning conditions as soon as possible, I thought it would be worthwhile if I share with you what some of them are. So firstly, we need to submit a construction environmental management plan, also known as a SEMP. This document catalogues how we will minimize our impacts on the community and environment in terms of noise, dust, and vibration generation. It also ensures that we have methods in place to minimize impacts on local ecology, such as water quality and trees. We also have to submit details on our site compound, including its proposed layout, our hours of operation and the hours we will accept deliveries and arrange dispatches from site, as well as providing information on how we're going to prepare the site ready for our compound and how we will reinstate the site once we're finished with constructing the scheme. Our Construction Traffic Management Plan, or CTMP, covers how we will route vehicles within site, both construction and non-construction. It also covers the type of activity we will carry out and the impact these will have on the highway. Due to the road closure of Terry Avenue, we have to provide diversion routes for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. Finally, the CTMP, in conjunction with an independent road safety audit, will inform what safety mitigation measures are needed for all users of the site. The independent road safety audit brief is developed in conjunction with CYC, City of York Council, to ensure all elements of potential concern are captured and reported upon. Part of the mitigations to maintain safety is to suspend parking on one side of Butcher Terrace to allow greater room for users to share that space. The displaced parking will be moved to outside of the site compound at the bottom of Butcher Terrace. Finally, tree protection plans must be submitted to ensure we adequately protect exposed trees and mitigate against any potential damage that may be caused. So, as mentioned previously, we have obviously these planning conditions we have to satisfy, but we're also preparing to carry out some pre-construction activities such as crown lifting. And crown lifting involves removing the lower branches of a tree to ensure that vehicles can pass below the canopy without damaging the tree. Because if we don't go in and do the crown lifting at this point, if a vehicle is to snag itself on a lower branch, it will rip the branch off rather than it being a clean cut. All of our crown lifting activities will be carried out with guidance from City of York Council. We will also be carrying out photographic surveys of the whole area to ensure that it is reinstated to the same condition as we find it. We will carry out external and internal photographic surveys of certain properties, as well as if your property has been identified as needing an internal survey, we will be in contact with you in due course. We're just getting all the paperwork, etc., ready for a subcontractor to come out and carry out this survey. Once our planning conditions are satisfied, our first task will be to set up our site compound in Roundtree Park, and we expect this kind of setup period to last roughly a month. As mentioned previously, we have submitted diversion routes to the council for consideration. Currently, we have an east diversion route via Newark and a west diversion which has been developed with the input from cycle groups and also in conjunction with the council. Since undertaking our road safety audit, we've actually identified that the existing York I travel route, which is very similar to the west diversion route, is most likely to be a more suitable route, as it is already identified as existing cycling infrastructure and is familiar with existing users. The final decision on the preferred routes will be decided between us, the Environment Agency, and City of York Council. Once diversions are in place, there will be an initial 4-week review, and then this will be followed by subsequent reviews, most likely at 3-month intervals, but again, this is yet to be agreed upon with the council. As mentioned previously, our independent road safety brief is developed in conjunction with the council and informs the final mitigation and diversions which will be put in place. I'll now pass you over to Vicky, who will discuss with you our proposed programme management and engagement plan.
Lovely, thank you, Stephen. So yeah, I'm Vicky McCausland, and I've probably met a lot of you already. I'm the project client for this scheme, which in simpler English basically means that I'm that friendly face in the environment agency that you can all come to if you have any questions to move things forward. So in terms of delivering the scheme, we have obviously spoken about our aim to be on site in autumn this year. But as per any construction that happens across the country, there's always programme risks. Stephen's mentioned the requirement of our pre-planning conditions. We cannot start on site until every single one of those has been approved by City of York Council, which is why the team is working really hard behind the scenes to make sure that those conditions are put back to the council with all the information so that we can move forward as quickly as possible. Marilyn mentions that we received the final precondition information last week, but as Stephen rightly says, we have been working behind the scenes previously to try to move things on as quickly as possible. As well as that, there's two other elements that need to happen before we can start on site, and that is an application for a flood risk permit and an environmental permit. These are applications that we have to put to ourselves, the environment agencies. There's a completely separate team that deals with this. And this is to ensure that our work isn't going to increase flood risk to anybody while we're doing our construction, and also that there'll be no environmental damage as a result of our work, and that all the mitigation that is required is in place to reduce any environmental impacts. We're obviously moving into a period of, technically we're supposed to get wetter weather, so we're moving into autumn winter, which could mean that we have raised river levels. Again, we can't do anything about that, and it's ensuring that our construction works are put in place and our compound and those kind of things are done and they're raised above the river levels. That will ensure that our materials aren't washed downstream, that there's not a risk to our infrastructure itself, and that we've got procedures in place. That's really important. Speed procedures that if river levels do rise, we can vacate the area safely. And there's the big one on there as well, COVID-19. We're in a very difficult situation at the moment. Things seem to be getting slightly easier in terms of restrictions, but one thing we're really going to have to keep an eye on is the government guidance of how we can interact in light of COVID-19. There's no restrictions in terms of starting work on site. Obviously, extra procedures will need to be in place. And that is something that we have done at the moment, but active monitoring is really important to us to ensure that everything is done safely for the public and also for our construction team. And then there's the unknown. We know it's an area of archaeological interest. Things have been found there before in the past. So until we break open that ground, we don't know what's there. We've been working closely with a lot of organisations across the city to understand the site a lot more. Processes will be in place if anything is found, but obviously it does pose a risk to the programme, as does any other unforeseen issues that do arise. What we do as a project team, myself and Stephen and our contractors as well, is that we have a programme which lists all the risks that we think are out there, and that is a programme that we really do keep an eye on, monitoring what is happening and putting things in place to ensure that any risks that come up or are removed are managed, so that we're not sat here waiting for something to happen and we all go, oh my goodness, now what? It really is about making sure everything's in place to reduce the impact of any risk that does occur. Now, a lot of you will have seen me in a more engagement role. Part of my role is about being out there and talking to people. And this slide really is to kind of set the scene as to what we are trying to achieve over the next few months. We've been engaging in Clementhorpe for a number of years now, obviously historically when we've tried to look at schemes in the past, and ever since the floods in 2015, we've obviously been very active in the area. And what has been really important is to really speak to you and talk to you and listen to the community. And that's why I think we both have a role to play, us as an organisation and also you as a community. So what we're doing as the Environment Agency is currently we have monthly project updates. So the next one will be due literally next week. And that is to give you an update exactly as to where we are with things, what it is that we're doing each month to move the scheme forward. Another thing that we're currently doing is really utilising social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these platforms that can be used to get our messages out to the public. York has also obviously got a lot of media outlets, so York Press, radio stations, where again we can talk to the community. And this event today, this virtual event, is a little bit of this new world that we're living in. We're really having to move right now into this period of electronic and virtual communication. Again, with the COVID situation, we will keep an eye on that. We are planning to do more of these events if the situation stays as it currently is. Obviously, as things start to relax, we'll be having a look at what we can do actually to bring that face-to-face interaction back onto the table. To try to help with that situation, we are looking at putting a notice board up in the Millennium Bridge area so that information will be directly on site. So when people are passing and moving around, that will be there for people to see. And that is something that has really come from listening to you people as the community who utilise that space. One thing that you said to us was there's nothing physically on site. So historically, we then went back and we put posters up. What we're saying now is actually we can put a notice board up, people will be able to see that information, which really shows how vital it is that you as a community have that role to play in how we're engaging. It is about right now, like I say, email. We are always on the end of an email. The team is still working. Unfortunately, we're not within the office. We are working at home, but we can respond to emails. Really, really important is if people can register to be on our mailing list, that helps us get information out there quicker, easier, and obviously it's better for the environment to do so as well. And great to see people on these virtual events this evening. And again, if it's things that work for people, it's something that we can continue to do into the future. So what are we going to do in August? Almost August already, which is quite scary in itself. Things are going so quickly. And what the team is actually going to be focusing on in August is obviously trying to get the pre-planning conditions approved by City of York Council. That is critical for us to be able to be on site in autumn. As part of that, we've also talked about the planning permits that are required. So those applications will be going in to ourselves in August as well. Our monthly project update will be coming out next week. So everyone that is already on the mailing list will receive that. If there's anybody here today that isn't, we can share our email address for you to get in contact to make sure that you do receive that electronically. The notice board that I talked about will also be installed in August, and the work that Stephen has touched upon, the crown lifting along Terry Avenue, will also start, and we'll be working with City of York Council to make that happen. As I've mentioned, COVID-19 is here, and we will be proactively keeping an eye on the guidance and ensuring all our procedures are up to date to keep ourselves and the community safe. And importantly, what we want to do in September is focus on having another virtual event like this, where we can go through where we are, what's changed, and more detail actually about what it is we're constructing and what that construction could mean to you as a resident or somebody of the wider community.
Thank you, Vicky.
Over to you, Edward.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone, and thanks. And it's great to see so many people here. So what I'm going to do is read out the questions that have been submitted by onto Slido. It's not too late if you want to add some using the information which is there. I'll just read them out because I appreciate it can be a bit difficult to read on screen sometimes. There is the option to, as you can see, maybe upvote or like with the thumbs up for particular questions that you'd like to see prioritized. So I'll focus on those first. We want to give everyone an equal opportunity to ask questions. So I will try and kind of make sure that everyone at least asks one question. And then if we've got time, then go to people who've asked multiple questions and try and address those as well. Sometimes with some of the questions, we will have to come back to you and individually and give you a bit more background info because we might have to go back and check. So it's just to flag that beforehand. The first question, which is the most top rated question, which is from pedestrians and cyclists together. Can you justify your safety plans by showing the details of risk assessments used? And that question I'll direct to Stephen.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are a public organisation, so everything we have is available to the public, providing it's not deemed commercially sensitive. So absolutely, if people want to see our risk assessments, we're more than happy to share them. Currently, we've had a level 1 road safety audit carried out, and that was obviously developed in conjunction with City of York Council. The next stage for us is to bring in our traffic management subcontractor, who will inform us where signage needs to be best placed. And again, the outputs of that traffic management plan will also be audited via road safety audit level 2. Again, we're happy to share the outputs of those with the public. That is not, there's no issue there.
Thanks, Stephen. So I'll just tick that question. The next question, and there's a few questions which have been upvoted by related to Jamie, which is relating to this LTN 1-20, which is, how will the junction of Butcher Terrace and Bishop Fort Roads be modified in accordance with the design principles of LTN 1-20 Chapter 10? If I just put that back to Stephen again.
Okay, so I'm not entirely familiar with this technical note. So it may have to be something that we come back to at a later date. All I can say is that discussions I've had with Highways Development Control to date have not, there's been no discussion of any modification to that junction. Our road safety audit has deemed it to be perfectly suitable based on the traffic that will be using it. As part of our planning application, we submitted swept path analyses to show how that junction would be used by large vehicles. Again, we've highlighted any concerns that might happen as a result of large vehicles using that junction, and we have mitigated that by routing them via different routes. So as I say, I'm not overly familiar, in fact, not familiar at all with LTM 1-20/20. However, currently there are no plans on the table to modify that junction.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, although I'm ticking these questions as we go through them, they are archived. So ones where we do have to come back or we don't get to address, we can still respond to it at a later date. Next question. Your predicted flood levels are lower than those of the highest flood in the year 2000. Please confirm that your designs will be corrected to provide adequate defenses. And sorry, Stephen, but I will send this over to you again.
I'm clearly a popular person today. Yeah, so I believe I know which individual this is from, or individuals this is from. If it is from another individual, I do apologize. Please get in contact with us. But basically, you submitted information, you submitted questions to us based on this, and we have submitted our response to you. So everything that I have to say, we have to say regarding that matter is within that response. If there are any additional questions that come out of that, then obviously you get in touch with us. So yeah, that's all I really have to say on that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question from Susan Palmer. Just how disruptive will the works in front of Waterfront House be? How long will the noise last? Will the noise be continuous?
I'm guessing that's for me as well, Edward. Yes. Right, okay. And sorry, just to add on to the comment about flood levels. So as an agency, we use the best consultants in the country to carry out hydrological models, and all of our schemes are based on the outputs of hydrological models. Those models are then ratified by our internal modeling teams. We are completely confident in the outputs that these models have generated, and thus we are completely confident in the level of protection we are affording to the Clementhorpe communities. So just to add that onto that last question. This question here, so as with all construction activities, noise will be generated, vibrations will be generated, and dust will be generated. I mentioned previously when I was presenting about the CEMP, the Construction Environmental Management Plan. That document aims to catalogue via risk assessments issues that are caused by the generation of sound, dust, and vibration. We also, through that document, specify particular mitigations that have to be put in place. Now, because of the nature of the site, which is fairly constrained and linear, we will basically be monitoring sound levels around the site. because there's guidance available and thresholds set that receptors or people or buildings or whatever can be exposed to before certain mitigations have to be put in place. Now, I have some meetings lined up next week with a noise specialist, which will help inform our final mitigation plans for the community, specifically for Waterfront House. And we're probably looking at some kind of threshold system whereby we monitor, and if a threshold is met, we then start like a second level of mitigation, sound mitigation, whatever. So at the moment, I kind of have ideas and principles in my head about how we're going to manage this, but the detail won't probably come for the next few weeks. All I will say is that, as Vicky mentioned earlier, we will be doing more detailed engagement via another virtual meeting like this. I stress, please dial into that meeting, as your questions will be answered within that meeting when the information is available.
Thank you, Stephen. Just to address a question which has come in the chat, I'm mindful that we are going on from question to question without giving the chance to people to come back and forth. Due to the volume of questions that we do have, we're going to prioritize going through addressing the questions that people have asked, because there's a large volume. But I will put in the chat box our email address if people do want to come back and continue the conversation about particular questions or the responses that we've given. So just moving on to the next question that we have. I just got a few windows open at the moment. This is from Anonymous. Can you speed up the construction process so that the 140 properties / 300 residents of Clementhorpe do not have the stress of possible flooding in 2021? And I might ask that question of Vicky this time around.
Thank you, Edward. Give Stephen a break. I think the key thing here is obviously the work that we have to deliver along this entire stretch is very difficult work, and it does include a lot of underground work. The issue that we are going to have is this very, very complex and does take time. So unfortunately, our priority right now is to get on site as early as possible, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to speed the work up along more than that kind of 12-month, 18-month period that we have suggested. We will be trying to phase the work so that some of the key elements are delivered as quickly as possible. And again, as Stephen mentioned, the meeting that we will have in September, we'll be able to go into that phasing in more detail with you all.
Thank you, Vicky. Next question, which is from Rosie Baker. Will the junction at Butcher / Bishopsthorpe, God, pronunciation, safety be reviewed after 4 weeks and at 3-month intervals as well, please? And I'll put that to Stephen.
Absolutely, yeah. So part of the discussions we've had with the council around obviously the contentious nature of the access route to site is using this as kind of best practice, this kind of review period. So the initial 4 weeks was to capture how the initial stages and changes were going, and to see if any changes or improvements needed to be made. And that is, you know, the full access route, which is obviously Bishopthorpe Road, Butcher Terrace, Terry Avenue, all the way down to, you know, basically the work phase down on Terry Avenue itself. So that whole area will be monitored and will be reviewed initially after 4 weeks. And after that, as I said, I'm not entirely sure what the time frame will be, but most likely a 3-month interval. So yeah, absolutely, it will be captured.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, which is from Pedestrians and Cyclists Together. How will you ensure public safety 24/7 on Butcher Terrace and Bishopthorpe Road in relation to the caravan and hotel traffic using that route? And if I could direct that to Stephen again, please.
Okay, so part of an ask by the Highways Development Control Officer is that we reach out to the caravan park and see if there's any way that they can stagger how their guests arrive, because at the moment basically they have one time where everyone turns up and kind of one time where everyone needs to leave by. So apparently they've trialed something around the country because of COVID where they kind of stagger when people arrive, and I think that would be really beneficial to do that for for the duration of this scheme as well. And I've had conversations with the caravan park about that, and they're certainly open to trialing something. So there's obviously conversations need to continue, but that will hopefully reduce the intensity or surge of traffic at any one time. With regards to Rooms Hotel, we're not expecting a large volume of traffic to be generated by that business. There are obviously service vehicles and delivery vehicles that will visit the hotel, as well as private taxis. There are very limited parking spaces on site because of the fact that the business is within a floodplain. So, we're not overly concerned about the volume of traffic that business will generate. With regards to ensuring public safety 24/7, I think we will we will put safety systems in place, but as with any public space, it's down to the individual to ensure their own safety, and the mitigations that we install will be there 24/7. But as with any open space, it isn't the responsibility of the police or the environment agency or anyone to ensure anyone's safety. It's down to the individual. So I'm not really sure how to answer that part of the question.
Thank you, Stephen. So the next top-rated question, things are moving around a bit, but that means people are interacting, which is great, is from Peter Huxford for the Trans-Pennine Trail. Will diversionary routes be accessible for wheelchairs, special bikes, etc.? And sorry, Stephen, but since we're talking about access, come back to you.
Okay, so So basically, the routes that we have put forward, so as I said, we have the route via Newark, and we have the route on the west bank. Again, that one is kind of open for debate a little bit, is using existing cycling infrastructure in the whole. And as I mentioned earlier, if we do move towards using the iTravel route for the western bank, again, that is using existing cycling infrastructure. So those routes are, I believe, are accessible to wheelchairs and special bikes. I know Blue Bridge has a slight hump in it, which I've been told that people can ground out on, but in the whole, these routes are accessible.
Thank you, Stephen. The next question is from Susan Palmer. Will works cause vibrations which could break freestanding bowls/vases? And if I could ask you, Stephen, on that one.
Okay, so as with any construction activity, as I mentioned earlier, there will be sound, dust, and vibration which is generated. Now, humans are particularly sensitive to vibrations which are caused by any activity. Now, we've obviously looked at the type of activity that we will be doing on site. We've also looked at the type of vehicle or plant we will be using on site, and the level of vibration generated is minimal and is below threshold. So although you might be able to perceive a vibration, kind of like when a lorry goes past your property or whatever, you feel kind of the building shake a little bit. It's not going to be enough to displace any ornaments or pictures or anything like that from your mantelpiece. So I really wouldn't worry about that.
Thank you, Stephen. And the next question is anonymous. It's voted 3 times, which is, what is the remedial plan for Terry Avenue?
Again, I'm guessing that's me.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier about carrying out this dilapidation survey or kind of photographic survey of the whole site. The idea of that basically is when construction vehicles start coming through, obviously they put a lot of stress on the existing infrastructure, the roads. There's also street furniture as well, such as bollards and bins and lampposts, etc. It's important for us to catalogue everything, because if any of that is damaged, we need to make sure that it's put back as we found it. And with regards to kind of the carriageway, the surface of the carriageway, if it's chewed up as part of our construction activity, which it will be because we're installing a fairly substantial seepage mitigation along the length of Terry Avenue, what that essentially will mean for Terry Avenue is that we will strip off the tar macadam and then replace that with a new layer and reinstate it, so there'll be essentially a fresh paved road for Terry Avenue. And that's the same wherever we are. So if we identify that a road has been degraded due to our activity, then it will be reinstated. It's the same for the where we're going to have our compound in Roundtree Park. Any grass verges, any street furniture which is damaged, anything which is damaged, as I said, is captured in this pre-construction photographic survey, and then from there we can use that as a base to make sure that remediation is done correctly.
Thank you, Stephen. The next question, which I'll direct to Vicky, is how high will crown lifting be?
Okay, so as Stephen was mentioned earlier, we are looking at crown lifting so that the vehicles can get over there safely. We have been talking with City of York Council as about how far we need to go with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, I think we have agreed a height of 5 meters to do the crown lifting.
I was going to say, yeah, that number rings in my head for some reason, yeah. So I think 5 meters is sufficient.
Yeah, so I will confirm that, and if that does change, we'll obviously let people know.
Thank you, Vicky. And the next question, if I could also ask you this, Vicky, is will the work take place on weekends during the project?
So our aim is that the work will take place Monday to Friday. I know we do have options to work on a Saturday if required, but we are aiming for the work to be Monday to Friday.
Thank you. And a question from Peter Huxford. Safety measures and signs often degrade during the contract. Who will the contact? And unfortunately, it cuts off there, but we might have to return to that one. Or if Peter, if you could email us or repost the question, that'd be great. Sorry.
I'm wondering if Peter's alluding to, so for example, let's say we have a sign and it degrades and it's no longer usable. Is there anyone that can be contacted to maybe get the sign replaced? That kind of, if it is that, then I'll try and answer it. So as outside of our compound, there will be contact details for nominated representatives of the construction team. And obviously you can, I'm not sure what details will be given, whether it be an email address or a mobile number, maybe both. I don't know at this stage. So, you know, first port of call would be to contact them because they can probably do something about it quicker. But, you know, failing that, you can drop the project team an email and we'll make sure that something is done about it.
And I think one thing to remember as well is that all our mitigation is going to be reviewed frequently. And as part of us being on site, we will obviously be having a look around, making sure everything is in place, nothing's been moved. I know what students can be like in York as well for throwing stuff in rivers and things. So again, we will be double checking as part of our general day-to-day business. And if there are any issues, then they will be replaced. But obviously, yes, if there are concerns, then you will be able to contact us and we'll confirm the details at the next event in September.
Thank you, Vicky. And the next question is from Susan, and I'll send this to you, Vicky, because you have the slide on future risks. Okay. So this question says, how long is this work really going to be? COVID, 2 years of potential flooding? Be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. We are here to be honest. The programme that we're looking at is obviously looking at potentially the closure of Terry Avenue for 12 months, a construction programme of up to 18 months. There are always going to be risks and things could change. As long as everything goes to plan, we are looking at 18 months construction.
Thank you, Vicky. And next we have a couple of questions from Jamie, which are in relation to the LTN 120. But if we go on to the question from Jamie, which is not relating to those, which is, I'll just highlight it, and is what measures will you take to minimize the risk of vehicles having to reverse on Terry Avenue? And if I could direct that to you, Vicky, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the traffic management plan that we're putting together, we're obviously having a look at putting in, oh my gosh, I've forgotten the name of them, passing places, that's the one. So we're having a look at putting in 3 passing places along Terry Avenue, and obviously having a look at that line of sight. There are a few places where there are bends in the road down there, so it will be passing places, and obviously a lot of signage down there as well. One of the key things that we really need to think about is informing the users of some of those spaces, so Rooms Hotel, and the caravan park as well. So we're already engaging with them and thinking about what information we can actually get to the people using their spaces so they are fully aware of what is happening and how they can access the site. Stephen's also touched on us talking to particularly the caravan park about staggering access to the site throughout the day, which will again minimise that risk. And all these things will be put into the revised construction traffic management plan, and we will then be looked at independently as part of that road safety audit. If anything else is identified that can be done to minimise those risks, we will obviously then take that into account.
Thank you, Vicky. Next question, which is from Anonymous. Is Butcher Terrace included in your photographic pre-construction survey? There is going to be a significant increase in traffic, including heavy plant. If I could direct that to you, Stephen.
Yeah, of course. Yes, to answer it simply, but not just Butcher Terrace as well. This is part of one of our pre-commencement planning conditions that we were talking about earlier. So we've basically done a mock-up of where we think we should do the photographic surveys, and that's gone over to Highway Development Control for their comment, and they've come back to say that actually they want a few other areas included within that as well. So it's Butcher Terrace, it's all those kind of side streets which join Butcher Terrace perpendicularly, just in case stray vehicles come down there or whatever. You know, we want to capture the current state of the road, street furniture, as I mentioned earlier. But Butcher Terrace, absolutely, it's identified as part of the access route to site. So that will be photographed in high detail. And, you know, we are, of course, willing to share the outputs of this survey with whoever wants to see it. So if that's something you're interested in, then get in touch.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, which is from Anonymous. You are starting work as the days draw in. How will you guarantee the safety of cyclists? And this comes back to an earlier question that was directed at Stephen. So I'll just come back to you on this one.
Okay, so part of the road safety audit will look at lighting. It will look at the mitigations that we are suggesting to go down Terry Avenue. It will look at any mitigations that are implemented along Butcher Terrace. But again, you know, the safety comes down to the individual. Our mitigations will be in place. They will be in place 24/7. The space will be available for people to use. You know, but your safety is your own. We cannot enforce or you know, we can't enforce your safety. It's down to you to ensure that you know, you are safe using that space. But our mitigations will be in place 24/7.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, again, it's been submitted anonymously. Always struggle with that word. Will we get a detailed response to the documents submitted to you by residents, councillors, York Civic Trust, Friends of Roundtree Park, and York Cycle Campaign? And if I could direct that to Vicky.
Yeah, absolutely. Very simple answer to that is yes. These were obviously two main documents that were submitted on the planning portal just after we had the planning committee itself. We have reviewed those internally, and we will be having discussions with City of York Council as to the recommendations that have been put forward by those groups. As soon as we have the response from that, I'll be able to give a final response over to the people that submitted those. So yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Vicky. Next question from Pedestrians and Cyclists Together. What are your costings for construction access plan in comparison with other access plans given by the public? And again, I'll come back to you, Vicky, for that one.
Yeah, thank you. So from this, I would suggest this is about how much are we spending on putting this mitigation in place. I think the key thing to get across to people is that this isn't about cost for us. This is about ensuring that people are safe. We are putting mitigation in place and having the independent survey done to ensure that everything that is required is done so. If any recommendations are highlighted by City of York Council's Highway Department and through the independent road safety audit, they will be put in place. I know a lot of the recommendations that have been put forward are kind of wider opportunities to improve the existing infrastructure, which is something that we wouldn't look at be doing as part of that scheme. But anything that is there to ensure public safety that is identified by the process of doing the independent road safety audit will be taken into account. So we don't actually have a breakdown of all those individual costs that we can share at the moment, because like I say, for us, it is about ensuring people are safe.
Thanks, Vicky. The next two questions relate to engagement from Susan, and I'm going to try and group them together, and let's hope technology is kind to me. Most residents of Waterfront House do not use social media. You need to find an alternative way to communicate with us. And a related question from Susan, I don't use Twitter, nor do a lot of my neighbours. What about us being informed? And if I could put that to you, Vicky.
Yeah, of course you can. So Twitter is literally one way that we engage with people, and we don't get a huge amount of feedback. A lot of people don't use Twitter. You're absolutely correct. One of the pushes at the moment is obviously about having an electronic mailing list, so anybody can be on that. You don't have to be somebody that lives very local to Waterfront House or the scheme. You can be anywhere within York or the country to be on that mailing list. But it would be invaluable to hear from you as residents about how you would like to be engaged with. We certainly have a lot of information on specifically Waterfront House, but if it still isn't getting through, contact me. I'm sure at the end of this is our email address available to people so that they can take that away. To give me, send me an email, let me know, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about the best ways to get our information to you.
Thanks, Vicky.
Sorry, Edward. We have got a feedback option which will pop up right at the end of this, and in that it asks you how you've been, how did you find out about the meeting, and how you'd like to be engaged with. So if there's anything in there that you think we've missed, please do let us know. It will just take you 2 minutes to fill in the questions. There's only a few short questions, and like Vicky says, your feedback is invaluable to us. So I'll open that up as soon as we've come to the end of the questions.
Thanks, Marilyn. We have a question from Jamie, which says, what happens if measures to ensure safety push the cost-benefit ratio down from the current 1.06? And if I direct that to Stephen, please.
Okay, so actually it's not currently 1.06, it's 1.09. As with all capital schemes, measures are put in place to ensure that there's a sufficient risk pot, and that is obviously taken into account and is incorporated with a total cost scheme, and is basically comes, you know, so the BCR, benefit cost ratio, is a relationship between how much it costs to build a scheme and the benefits which are derived from the scheme. As I said, we're currently on 1.09, and we have a risk pot in there should any unforeseen events arise. We have systems in place to, hopefully this won't happen, but we have systems in place to ask for more money. But based on the kind of research we've done today and or the planning we've done on Clementhorpe, we're confident that that is not going to be the case.
Thanks, Stephen. And I suppose another question relating to finances is from Susan Palmer. Are we going to receive any financial compensation should we have to decamp? But I will send that one to Vicky.
Thanks. So this is again part of our planning as to what is going to be required. And I know we're doing a lot of work on what we had the environmental management plan, which obviously looks at that vibration and noise, which are probably some of the reasons why people may feel that they can't stay into those properties. Stephen touched on obviously having some meetings next week where we're having a look at having threshold levels to say whether there is a risk there for people staying in their properties. If that is identified, we will obviously contact those homeowners to discuss the kind of mitigation that we could put in place. I know there's other schemes where we have provided accommodation. We've again listened to the people that would be affected, so it's people working shifts, those kind of things. They're clearly going to need somewhere to sleep. So it really is down to those individuals. I think what would be really important, Susan, is that we actually have these meetings so we get that real information and that detail for you. And if you have some concerns yourself, again, get in contact, and then we can have a little bit more of a discussion on a one-to-one basis. But again, at the event that we have in September, we'll be able to share more information about any of those risks if they are coming to light, and if so, what we're going to do to help you.
Thanks, Vicky. Next question. And what is the expected increase in floodwater on Butcher Terrace following this work? Brackets, downriver, bracket, close brackets. And if I could direct that to Stephen.
Yeah, I don't know is the answer. So that'll be a question that we have to come back to after this meeting. That we will know what that increase is if there is an increase, but I don't want to give false information at this point, so I'd rather us answer that afterwards.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would only add to that is, again, I can't remember the number off the top of my head and we can get back to you, but we're also having a look at a scheme down in the Butcher Terrace area, which is having a look at installing property flood resilience along properties there. Every single property that has been offered that, it is about having a look at the current risk now, the risk in light of climate change, and the risk of any increase in flood risk because of works across the city. So obviously we don't know who's asked that question, but just to give you that confidence, that has been looked into for all the other schemes that we're doing, and anything that we are doing will mitigate against any increase, but we will get back to you with that figure.
Thank you both. Next question, which is anonymous, is can you give an overview of times for plant, traffic, deliveries, etc. using Butcher Terrace? The adjacent streets are widely used by school children. So perhaps Stephen on this one?
Yeah, so one of our planning conditions constrains us to the time that we can work on site. And then we also have a further constraint on times we can accept deliveries to the compound and allow dispatches from the compound. So in terms of us working on site, like our working hours, Monday to Friday is 7:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. On a Saturday, although we don't envisage working on a Saturday, but if a critical task needs to be carried out for whatever reason, the times on a Saturday are 9 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then in terms of deliveries and dispatches from site, deliveries and dispatches from site cannot occur until after 9 a.m. in the morning up until 5 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you. The next question from Christopher Ranger. The designers have adopted freeboard levels of 230 millimeters, which is below the 300 millimeter minimum required by PPG 25. Why? If I could direct that to you, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't really be talking about this kind of thing in this particular forum, but basically, when our hydrological models are constructed, an output is given from that hydrological model, and that output is then used to develop our schemes. Now, depending on the confidence of that hydrological model, we give something to it called the model uncertainty allowance. So that's the new term used for what used to be called the freeboard value. And that model uncertainty allowance is generated and ratified, and it's basically to mop up any uncertainty in that model. So the old kind of guidance used to be kind of 300 millimeters, for your freeboard that you add onto your output, and that gives you your defense crest level. But now that we have sophisticated hydrological modeling, we don't apply a set value. We have what we call a model uncertainty allowance, and that varies depending on the certainty of the model. So that is the reason why we are lower than 300 millimeters. Thank
you, Stephen. Next question, which is anonymous. Do you accept the significance of the risks identified in the document submitted to you by residents, Civic Trust, Cycle Campaign, and councillors? And I'll direct that to Vicky.
Okay, thank you. So yes, again, thank you for submitting those documents. I have been through them myself and identified the risks that you have put in there, and I recognise people do have concerns associated with them. I think the key thing that we have here is that the role of the Environment Agency as a project team is obviously about delivering improved flood defences. Because of that, we therefore go to the likes of City York Council and our independent road safety auditor, who can have a look at the risks associated with the transport and cycle infrastructure to identify where we need to do something. So I'm obviously not a highway engineer, and that is why we need these people, and we use them independently so that anything that is identified to us that we do take on board. I do understand where people have risks as residents living in these areas, and I'm more than happy to talk through them with these people. I think Councillor Kilbane has said that this was a question from himself, and I'm more than happy to discuss that with you, Councillor. And like I said before, I will be providing a full response to those documentations.
Thank you, Vicky. Next question, which is, again, anonymous. It might be Pete with the technical issues. The Lendal Bridge floodgate replacement is potentially happening at the same time as the Terry Avenue closure. Can that be delayed so that it doesn't coincide? If I could direct that question again to you, Vicky, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess this is an example of the fact that York experienced significant flooding in 2015, and as a result of that, there's a lot of work that will need to happen across the city. One thing that we're looking at doing and working with our advisory group on is actually pulling together a programme of where our works are happening now. We're obviously in that process where we're getting programmes for construction and understanding what that impact would be, particularly on the likes of road closures, cycle network closures, footpath closures, and understanding what that looks like. We can then provide that information to this advisory group that I talk about, which is a group that we set up as part of the York Flood Plan, which pulls together lots of organisations so that we can talk about these issues and understand what it does mean. And it might be that that decision is thinking about, well, how can we delay things? Can we do things differently? Obviously, I can't give a definite yes or no, it can be delayed at this point, or which one gets, I guess, that top trump card, which one should be delayed against another one. But just to give you that confidence that we do recognise that there is going to be significant impacts, we're pulling that information together, and that will be available if people would like to see that.
Thank you very much, Vicky. We've got two last questions. One is related to the LTN 1-20, which will include in the response to Jamie after this. And then the other question is from pedestrians and cyclists together. Engagement needs feedback. What are the reasonings for not adopting various alternatives to construction access given by the public? Again, to you, Vicky, please.
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely, engagement does need feedback. Engagement, understanding how engagement that we have given has gone, and also how we are listening to you. When we were pulling together our construction access information, a lot of engagement took place, including the community event that was held by the councillors. Myself and Stephen attended that, and we talked about all the technically feasible options that were available to us. Obviously now, as part of the planning process, it has been agreed that the primary route for access will be down Butch Terrace and along Terry Avenue. We're obviously looking at how we could still use the wider access to potentially reduce that impact. But as part of the planning process, it has obviously now been agreed that we will be coming down Butch Terrace, as will obviously the access for the caravan park, Roundtree's Park car park, and Rooms Hotel as well. But again, ways of engagement, we would love to hear feedback. If people do want to see that documentation in terms of how we came to our decision that has been approved by planning, that is still available. So we have the access statement that was published, and obviously our construction traffic management plan. If people feel that they haven't seen that, again, get in contact and we can share that with you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Anonymous, and I should flag that we're kind of nearing the end. We've just got someone actually joining, just great timing, I'll add them in. So we'll just go through the last couple of questions before ending the session. This question is anonymous, and it says that they are pleased that deliveries will not start until after 9 AM, but concerned that they continue during the time children are returning from school, especially winter. So less of a question, but more of a comment, but just to flag that up for Stephen and Vicky. Thank you for whoever submitted that.
Edward, I'll just comment on that. That kind of thank you for that positive feedback there. I suppose for me it comes back to this review period that we're going to have on a 3-monthly basis or whatever. So if issues are highlighted, then that's the purpose of having that review period in there, and hopefully if there were any issues we could do something about it.
Thanks, Stephen. Next question is from Jamie. It says, condition 14 asks for an independent road safety audit. Will this be generally independent, or will it be from your, in inverted commas, auditor? And if I could direct that to Stephen.
Well, the question is slightly offensive in the sense that you think we're trying to hide things. The auditor is completely independent, and if you wish, we can share his credentials with you. We have no affiliation with him whatsoever, and the outputs of his road safety audits are his own words. So yes, he is completely independent.
And I think the other point to raise with that as well is that when the road safety audit is put forward, the scope for that is developed in conjunction with the auditor and City of York Council. We don't have a role to play in that. We literally wait until that audit lands on our desk, and that's when we take the points into consideration.
Thank you both. Final question, which is anonymous. Are the risks to cyclists and pedestrians any different to those experienced when Rooms was in the construction stage? If I could direct that to Vicky.
Yeah, I guess these will be, everyone will have their different opinions on this one. I guess the key thing, the two differences between the scheme is the construction traffic for the Rooms Hotel came down Clementhorpe itself, and therefore it did obviously interact with Terry Avenue, but for a shorter length. I can still understand why cyclists, pedestrians and other users of the Terry Avenue space are concerned that our traffic and other traffic will be using Terry Avenue for the longer length. And it is about just giving you confidence that we are taking your concerns seriously, and we will be putting the mitigation in place that is required.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the Q&A. Thank you so much for submitting all your questions and for your patience as we went through them. I'm now going to pass it back over to Marilyn, who's going to show or open up a session about getting feedback on this session.
Cool, right, thank you everyone. Thank you for all your questions, and thank you to Edward for facilitating that one for us. So like Vicky and Stephen, everyone has said, if you've got any further questions, please do get in touch. The email address has been put in the chat, but it's yorkfloodplan@environment-agency.gov.uk. And as Vicky said, that's monitored whilst we are working from home. So please ask questions. So one ask from you then, we do have a feedback, which a few short questions which we'd like you to answer, and it just helps us to get from you what it is or how you like to be communicated. So it shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. There are only a few short questions. I've no intention of showing the answers on here, so your answers are completely anonymous, but like I say, it just helps us shape our engagement. So hopefully that's popped up. If it hasn't, I might just click something. There we go. So if that's looking, or has anybody logged into the Slido and has that come up with the questions? Excellent. Right. Okay. Cool. So like I say, it should only take you 2 minutes, and you don't need to stay on the Zoom now. If you've got no further questions, further comments for us this evening that you'd like to speak to anyone, then thank you all for your time, and I wish you all a good evening. So thank you again.